All right, ready for a deep dive into something I think we all know a little too well. Workplace stress. That feeling. Deadlines, pressure, maybe even a little office drama on the side. You've brought in a really interesting source today on how to manage it all, and it's not just the same old tips.
Yeah, this one really digs deep. Like why stress hits us so hard, not just mentally, but like physically too. And get this, it even ties it all back to how well or how badly companies do overall.
That's what blew me away. I always thought stress was, well, stressful,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize how big of a deal it really is.
It's kind of wild when you really think about it, right? This source even brings in the World Health Organization. And, they have an actual definition for stress. It's not just in our head, it's a whole physical response. Like your heart's racing, your muscles tense up. It's almost like your body's ready for a fight or something.
So that actually explains the whole 3 p.m. chips and chocolate craving. But anyway, so the source, it goes into all the things that make this whole stress response go haywire at work.
Yeah.
It's like a greatest hits list of workplace anxiety.
Totally. I mean, think about it. Crazy workloads for one, or that feeling when you have zero control over what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the classic office politics.
Ugh, the worst.
Yeah, the source goes right for those big ones.
Okay, so we've established we're all stressed,
Yeah.
but this source doesn't just leave us there. It actually gives us some tools to fight back, which I appreciate. Ready to dig into those.
Let's do it. And I like how they start with time management because it's not about rushing, right? It's about being smarter with your time.
Prioritizing, all that good stuff.
Exactly.
Breaking those huge to-do lists into, well, things you can actually do.
Yeah, like how do you eat an elephant? Right.
One bite at a time.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I love that the source really emphasizes mindfulness and relaxation too.
So, meditation at my desk. Not sure my boss would go for that, but hey, I'm willing to try. What really stood out to me, though, was how much this source talked about building relationships at work.
It's huge having people you can actually talk to, bounce ideas off of, maybe even just vent to every now and then. It makes a big difference.
Totally. And it's not all on us to figure out, right? This source really calls out companies. They're finally realizing that ignoring stress, it's actually bad for business.
About time, right? Think about it. Stressed out employees mean less gets done, more people calling in sick. People are just quitting left and right.
It's like they're realizing maybe a well-rested, taken care of employee actually gets more done.
Exactly. The source even goes into how companies can actually help. And one of the things they highlight is a positive work environment where people feel good about what they're doing and respected.
So we're talking more than just free snacks and a ping pong table.
All right, this goes way deeper. It's about actually talking to each other, recognizing when someone does a good job, making it okay for people to actually speak their minds.
So helping each other up.
Yeah, it's about building a community, not just treating people like they're robots.
Totally. And this all kind of leads to the big idea the source keeps coming back to, resilience. And not just for us, but for the entire company, too.
Being able to roll with the punches, adapt, bounce back when things go wrong.
Which in this day and age is pretty much essential.
Right. And this is where it gets interesting because, they do recognize it's not always easy to just bounce back, especially in this always on, always working world.
Tell me about it. It's like we're expected to be available 24/7. Like if you don't answer that email at 10 p.m., you're not really committed.
Right. And this source doesn't shy away from those tougher parts of managing stress. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some real challenges out there.
We always talk about stress like it's a bad thing. But this source actually says, hey, not all stress is created equal.
Right, like there's a good side to stress.
Well, they talk about finding a balance, like the right amount of pressure can actually be a good thing.
Okay, so that thing where you get that challenging project and you're actually kind of pumped about it,
Yeah.
that's good stress.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. They even have a fancy name for it, eustress. Think of it like this. Your brain, it's like a muscle. If you never challenge it, it gets all weak, right?
Right.
But with the right amount of push, like good stress, it actually gets stronger.
So you need a little stress to actually perform well. I like that.
Right.
This is already changing how I think about this whole thing.
Yeah. And speaking of changing how we think, they talk a lot about self-awareness in this source. Like knowing yourself is super important when it comes to this stuff.
Being realistic about what we can handle.
Yeah. And like what stresses you out might not even bother me, right?
Yeah.
So knowing your own triggers, that's huge.
Oh, tell me about it. Tight deadlines make me a wreck. But one of my coworkers, she lives for that stuff. It's crazy how different we are.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's why they're all about this personalized approach to managing it. They even give you a whole framework for figuring out what works best for you.
So walk me through this. Let's say my biggest stressor, it's just feeling totally overwhelmed with work. Where do I even start?
So the first thing they'd say is, well, remember all that time management stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Prioritize, break it all down into smaller pieces. That's key.
Makes sense.
Mm.
Okay, but what if you're someone who gets stressed out by, I don't know, like difficult coworkers
Yeah.
all the time?
That's where communication comes in, learning how to have those tough conversations and setting boundaries, like healthy ones. Those are all things they talk about in here.
So it's all about recognizing what your thing is
Yeah,
and then finding the tools that actually work for you.
exactly. There's no magic formula for everyone. And one thing they emphasize, it's like you have to keep checking in with yourself.
Oh, so not just figure it out once and you're good.
Right. It's like, how are you doing? Do you need to adjust anything?
It's a good tune-up,
Yeah.
but for your stress.
I love that. And this is where the source dives into that thing we all know we should do.
Let me guess, it's probably something I'm not doing.
Maybe. But it's all that good stuff. How we're living our lives.
We mean sleep, eating right, exercising,
Mhm.
all the things that sound impossible when you're stressed.
It's tough. But the source really gets into this mind-body connection. Like, if you're not taking care of yourself physically, it's going to show up mentally too.
It's that whole, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Exactly. And they're not saying you have to be perfect. Just try to make small changes over time.
Like what? Where do you even start?
Well, take sleep, for example. They talk about creating a regular sleep schedule.
So no more scrolling on my phone until I pass out.
Well, they do talk about how that blue light from our devices can mess up our sleep.
Guilty as charged.
But yeah, consistency is key, they say. And then there's the whole food thing, what you're putting into your body.
See, when I'm stressed, all I want is like fries and ice cream. Maybe a little more ice cream.
Oh, totally. But they talk about how when you're stressed, your body actually releases these hormones that make you crave sugary, fatty stuff.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
Totally. But then there's exercise. And I know, who has time for a full workout when you're drowning in to-dos?
Seriously.
But what they say is that even just a little bit can make a difference.
Like what? What are we talking?
Quick walk at lunch, even just standing up to stretch every hour.
Small changes, big impact.
Got it. Okay, but what about those times when you're doing all the things, but you still feel stressed? Sometimes you just need to talk to someone.
100%. And this source is all about that. Having a support system, they say it's crucial.
And I don't mean venting to your cat.
Well, I'm sure your cat is a great listener.
Oh, the best.
But they're talking about people here, like
Yeah.
your coworkers, friends, family, maybe even a therapist. People who get it, who can just listen or offer advice or a shoulder to try on sometimes,
Sometimes just having someone to listen makes all the difference. Absolutely. And they even talk about how asking for help, it's not a weakness.
Oh, so true. It's so easy to think, I should be able to handle this.
Right. But they're saying it's actually a sign of strength. Like you're self-aware enough to know when you need help and you're not afraid to ask for it.
It's such a shift in thinking.
Right. And they even say, build your support system before you're in a crisis.
That's smart.
It's like having that emergency fund. Hopefully you never need it, but it's good to have it just in case.
Love that. This source, it made this connection I never really thought about before. It's like managing stress. It's not just about feeling better. It's about making better decisions too. Ethical ones, even at work.
Oh, that's so interesting. I never really connected those dots.
I know, right? But think about it. When you're completely stressed out, are you really thinking clearly?
Probably not.
Exactly. And this source basically says, when we're like that, we're way more likely to just react without thinking. Make impulsive choices we normally wouldn't.
Makes sense. Your judgment gets cloudy. And they're saying companies have a responsibility here, too. Like, they need to create an environment where people can actually make good decisions by helping them manage all this stress in the first place.
Right, because if everyone's totally burned out and panicked all the time, they're not going to make the best choices.
Exactly. It goes back to that whole open communication thing. When you feel safe and respected, you're going to be a lot less likely to just react without thinking.
It's all connected. Okay, ready for a total perspective shift? Because this source, it brought up something so simple, but it really got me thinking.
Okay, hit me with it.
It's finding meaning in what you do. Feeling connected to something bigger at work. The source basically says that sense of purpose, it can actually make you more resilient to stress in the first place.
That makes sense. It's like If you really care about what you're doing, if you're passionate about it, you're going to be more likely to handle it when things get rough.
Exactly. It's like, okay, this is stressful, but it matters. But how do you actually do that?
Hmm.
Find that meaning, especially if your job feels like, well, just a job.
That's where it gets really good. They say, think about what's important to you, your values, what you're good at, what kind of impact you want to make. And then try to connect those things back to what you do every day.
Even if it's not super obvious at first.
Yeah, like maybe you need to have a conversation with your boss about how you can use your skills in a way that feels more fulfilling,
Yeah.
Or even just trying to see how what you do, even if it's small, plays a part in the bigger picture.
Finding those little bright spots.
Exactly. And it's something you have to keep coming back to because what matters to you now, it might be different later on.
It's always changing, right?
Totally. So, yeah, even if your job isn't like your dream job, you can still find ways to make it meaningful. But it's not all on you, right? This source, they talk a lot about work-life balance too.
Music to my ears.
They're big on setting boundaries, making time for things you love outside of work, friends, family, hobbies, all of it.
It's that pour from a full cup thing again.
Totally. You can't be your best self at work if you're running on empty everywhere else.
So true. Okay, we've covered so much in this deep dive. If you're listening to this and you're feeling that weight of workplace stress, what are the big things to take away?
Honestly, first of all, you are not alone. We are all in this together, and you have more power than you think to actually manage it all. We talked about a ton of different things today. Find what works for you and make it a habit.
And companies, if you're listening, creating a workplace where people feel good, where they feel supported, that's not just a nice thing to do. It's good for everyone.
It's good for business.
Exactly. So to all our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some tools, some new ways of looking at things, maybe even a little bit of hope. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.